Hey internet friends! Making videos nowadays feels like a real gamble. The more dots I connect, the greater my odds are of waking up one morning and my channel being poof, gone. But like any worthy gambler, I'm willing to take that risk. Though it might require adjusting my strategy and minimizing my tells. And perhaps, most importantly, packing up my chips and moving from the losing table. So that's why today we're headed to the world's playground. The elusive oasis of the desert, venturing back to the arid past to ultimately figure out exactly who we're playing against. This video is not a critique of Sin City or those who built it. What is to come is a statement of how things were, how things are, and how we got to this point. You will find that this entire video has been sourced from numerous books, articles, documentaries, and official documents. So let's connect the past to the present by delving into history once hidden. The history of Las Vegas. Before Vegas was a kaleidoscope of neon, it housed lush springs that attracted thirsty natives, Spanish conquistadors, exhausted travelers, and even members of a church that would be known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Spanish for the meadows, Las Vegas was an isolated stretch where fresh water gushed from the dry desert, conveniently situated between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles, making it a prime location for a settlement, or more specifically, a fort. The study of the relationship between the Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, and Sin City is imperative in unearthing the hidden history of Vegas. The story begins with a New Yorker by the name of Joseph Smith. Smith claimed to have been visited by the God of Most High, who told Smith that all of the religions and churches of old were corrupt. And as the chosen one, Smith was to deliver this revelation and establish the true church in North America. To go along with this church would be its own book, the Book of Mormon, which Smith claimed to translate after an encounter with an angel. And the book detailed a historical account of Jewish people in their early migration to America. And to make a long story short, Mormonism became a religion for the pioneering spirit of the New World, the Promised Land, which attracted a multitude of followers despite a strict code of no coffee, alcohol, tobacco, or gambling, though eventually the church permitted the controversial practice of polygamy. Mormons were effective in defending their trek to the breadbasket of biblical civilization, colonizing territories along the way and expanding their influence, which is why they emerged as one of the wealthiest, most powerful, and fastest growing churches in the world. But there were dark days on the dusty road to Zion. The Mormons perceived themselves to be a persecuted people in their own right, and tensions between the church and the outside world arose, resulting in war and massacre, creating a need for the Mormons to establish their own banks, politicians, unassuming alliances, and band of assassins, whilst continuing to expand their reach. Which is why in the late 1850s, the second president of the Mormon Church, Brigham Young, directed members to build a fort in Las Vegas. But due to unforeseen circumstances, the mission was abandoned 2 years later. The Mormons weren't the only ones going through trials and tribulations during this time. The effects of the American Civil War were felt coast to coast, as the United States underwent turmoil as a vulnerable and bankrupt nation in the post-war era. But as always, foreign bankers were eager and waiting to remedy that turmoil, making copious lines of credit readily available so they could collect interest from those who desperately needed the money. What transpired serves as a prime example showcasing the absolute power of money in political matters, the ramifications of which have transcended time and space, up until this very moment. Under the pressure of foreign interests, Congress passed the Act of 1871, which provided a government for the District of Columbia, allowing Washington, D.C. to act as a corporation outside of the original Constitution, with subtle but impactful wording within the act itself. The notion of an incorporated United States has been dubbed a myth by popular sources, but the Act of 1871 paved the way for the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Which handed the United States gold and silver reserves to the Federal Reserve, a privately owned foreign banking entity. While Washington, D.C. was clearly on the map at this point, squished right between the Virgin Mary or Virginia and Maryland, Las Vegas still had a ways to go at the beginning of the 1900s as a sleepy railroad town with a meager population. But all that would change when the largest labor contract awarded by the U.S. at that time took place in Vegas's backyard, with the construction of the Hoover Dam. In tandem with the legalization of gambling and the implementation of a speedy 6-week divorce process, Construction of the dam brought in a multitude of eager workers looking for employment during the Great Depression. Workers weren't the only ones who rode into town that year. The mob arrived too. Meyer Lansky was a Jewish man from New York and protege of Arnold Rothstein. Lansky managed to obtain his wealth and influence through bootlegging and heroin sales during Prohibition, and he branched out to prostitution and gambling to ensure his corruption was implemented on a national scale. In addition to his entrepreneurship, he served as an investment banker and financer for other mobsters. And despite what public schools might be teaching these days, Lansky and his buddies were not at odds with the United States government. They were allies. The U.S. government employed Lansky during World War II, and likewise, Lansky brought in politicians and law enforcement, not just as pawns, but as partners to strengthen his crime syndicate. In the 1940s, Lansky, along with his fellow Jewish mobster Bugsy Siegel, set sights on Las Vegas, envisioning an isolated oasis where tourists could come and have no choice but to spend cash there. Lansky went on to monopolize much of what became the Las Vegas Strip, a network of all-cash casinos that served as an ideal way to launder money, all under the illusion of legalized fun. Bugsy Siegel, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. Bugsy parked himself in Vegas to take over the bookmaking in the casinos, but stayed because of his grand idea to develop the Vegas Strip, with the finances of his mob partners and loans from the Mormon Bank in Utah. But from the beginning, his grand idea of a tourist paradise was a money pit, and in his most desperate hour, he pioneered the marketing techniques Sin City would utilize for years to come. Cheap buffets, bingo, and random prize drawings that brought people to the glittering oasis. He'd spent over $6 million of other people's money to construct his fantasy, and that right there is used as the basis of the theory surrounding his murder. His assassination was carried out in June of 1947 in a Beverly Hills home. 2 shots to the head and Bugsy was dead, though his kingdom survived. One of the fellows who had helped build his kingdom, acting as a publicity agent for the Flamingo Hotel, was Hank Greenspun, a self-proclaimed Talmudic Zionist who became the publisher of the Las Vegas Sun newspaper, as well as a prolific Vegas real estate developer, and a point of interest in the Watergate scandal. As a major proponent of the establishment of Israel, Greenspun took it upon himself to help the cause by shipping machine guns and plane parts to a foreign organization which would soon become the IDF. After Greenspun's death many years later, Israeli newspapers remembered his contributions as greater than any other American, especially for having introduced Israelis to the biggest high roller to ever hit Las Vegas, a bright star of the Iran-Contra ordeal, Saudi arms merchant Adnan Khashoggi. Greenspun's legacy as a beloved IDF gunrunner who was pardoned by President Kennedy, as well as his close alliance with eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes, has been the basis of many documentaries, biographies, and publications, all mainly originating from the state of Israel. The Las Vegas of old was a place where everyone was from somewhere else. Hustlers could parade as kings of the desert. Quick marriages and even quicker divorces brought in the masses, and the opportunity to dip a single toe into the sensational and sordid kept them there, in a neon oasis of abundant power, with a limitless reservoir to quench one's thirst. At the height of the Cold War, mushroom clouds could be seen on Vegas's horizon, but what could be viewed from above was only a small indicator of what was going on below. Federal money poured into Nevada as nuclear testing facilitated employment opportunities, as well as other military projects of the subterranean variety. Vegas became even more of an American mecca when businesses realized they could capitalize on nuclear tourism in the radioactive desert. Scientists estimated that over 10,000 guinea pigs had died or were dying of leukemia from these tests. And by guinea pigs, I mean people. One man who was outspoken about the potential effects of nuclear testing was reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes, who arrived in Vegas in 1966 during the week of Thanksgiving. Howard Hughes was born in Texas to an affluent family in which his father was a successful inventor. Hughes went on to have an even more successful career as a pilot, filmmaker, investor, and World War II contractor, emerging from the war as a major figure of the military-industrial complex. Hughes had connections to the mob which had been documented by the FBI over the decades, and he acted like his mob friends too. He used his war profiteering proceeds for bribery in political matters, manipulating politicians and policies. He'd even worked hand in hand with the CIA when they attempted to oust Castro and cripple the Soviets back in the day. It's speculated that the manipulator became the manipulated in his later years. Hughes' physical and mental condition had deteriorated by the time he reached Vegas. Rumors of his drug addiction circulated, and his fragile mental state, along with his germophobia, kept him confined to a single hotel room on the Strip. As his paranoia heightened in Vegas, Hughes selected Mormons as his inner circle. The mobsters before him had the same idea. They built relationships with the Mormons not only because of the church's economic reach, but its members were recruited by mobsters and intelligence agencies alike because of their character, loyalty, and their unassuming ability to, well, persuade. Despite their conservative nature, Mormons by and large had been sold on Sin City for investment purposes at the economic benefit of the church. And just like the mafia, they took care of their own. Viewing Vegas as an investment, Hughes began buying up properties from the mobsters. And Nevada's Gaming Control Board pretty much gave him a free pass to all but monopolize the Vegas Strip, a courtesy they did not extend to those who came before him. In addition to purchasing hotels and casinos, Hughes bought an airport, an airline, a TV station, and gold and silver mines. In just a few years, Hughes managed to seemingly clean up the Strip, replacing it with a corporate facade. Curiously, around this time, President Nixon signed the Organized Crime Act of 1970, which targeted the mafia, or more specifically, the act of people conspiring together to conduct illegal business. That same year, Nixon signed a bill that created a new law allowing law enforcement to launch a total war against organized crime. No longer the land of the outlaw, with the help of Hughes and the United States government, Vegas underwent a major makeover. Sure, in the city that existed solely to make money, human and drug trafficking, gun running, money laundering, and intelligence operations, both domestic and foreign in nature, still took place. But there was now a respectable image to hide behind. An image the media portrayed for profit, marketing the opportunity for the public to spot a celebrity during their visit, or have a friendly encounter with a prostitute in a luxurious hotel room, after a cheap meal at the buffet and several free rounds of liquor. All comped, of course. Throughout the next several decades, numerous hotel casinos popped up, each one more lavish than the last. Steve Wynn, born Stephen Allen Weinberg, was one of the individuals who, under a corporate banner, brought the illusion of luxury to the Strip. The old was replaced with the new, true to the cycle of demolition and construction in Sin City. The formula that Meyer Lansky and his cohorts perfected was still in use, practiced by the new kings of the desert, but these kings had a more advanced strategy for their reign, since the corporate structure served as a means of protecting individuals from liability. And unlike the mobsters of the past, the corporate oligarchy no longer sent out hitmen as their first line of defense, but employed their extensive legal team to tie up nuisances with frivolous lawsuits, and financially assassinate those who dared expose their tricks. One prominent native Nevadan began his political career as an attorney, while Harry Reid was raised agnostic. He and his Jewish wife converted to Mormonism. And before Reid was ever the Democratic Senate Majority Leader, he was chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission. Eventually, he became known as one of the mining industry's most reliable allies in Congress. And during his service to the American people, Reid took it upon himself to block changes to a mining law from 1872, which allowed gold miners to take over $400 billion of gold from public lands without paying federal royalties. Lucky for Reid, he and his entire family have ties to gold mining companies, even owning a few mines themselves. This is just one example of his scandals, which you would be hard-pressed to find a politician out there who doesn't have a scandal or two. But the point remains, and it's that money clearly influences politics and public policy. Even though we're told through our government education and government-sponsored media that we're no longer living in the mobster era. Today, an estimated 86% of Nevada is federal land, mainly controlled by BLM, or the Bureau of Land Management. And within Las Vegas, corporate consolidation continues to take place, with 3 gaming companies controlling the majority of the money gambled on the Strip, and 3 companies having ownership of half of the hotel rooms. Within these hotels and casinos is more surveillance than you could possibly imagine. And underneath the Strip is an underground network of tunnels. Both above and below, there's more private security than government law enforcement officers. And the private security is trained by the Department of Homeland Security as well as the Israeli Defense Force. Despite the capable security and advanced surveillance systems, during the Las Vegas Harvest Festival that took place on October 1st, 2017, there didn't seem to be an excess of surveillance footage or clear photos of the shooter in the aftermath, and investigators couldn't find a motive for the shooter. So the government-sponsored news outlets don't discuss the deadliest mass shooting committed by an individual in the US anymore, unless it serves their political agenda. So, internet friends, I have a few follow-up questions for you. Can you name another place on Earth where the masses cycle through such an array of intense emotions, ranging from excitement, fear, desperation, panic, guilt, and elation? Is there a difference between the government and the mafia? If so, what is that difference? As always, I look forward to your comments. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting my channel on Patreon. Bye!